Cool. So keeping it going, this next panel is going to be great. Everyone's building new chains, but why? And I'll hand it over to our moderator, Liam from Anagram.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And if you wouldn't mind just taking conversation just outside, please. Perfect. All for the conversation. Let's just take it outside. That way we can listen to our wonderful panelists today. So, pleasure to meet you guys. My name is Liam. I'm with the Anagram team. Before we jump into kind of our topic today, I would love to pass it through our panelists to talk a little bit more about themselves and kind of what brings them here today. Magnus, please take it away.
I'm Magnus. I'm one of the co-CEOs of Interchain Labs, which is basically the Cosmos Foundation and Labs entity. So we build, if you've heard of the Cosmos SDK or IBC or Tendermint, those are all things that our company builds and maintains. The Cosmos ecosystem, if you're not familiar, is an internet of blockchains. It has over 150 blockchains in its ecosystem. Also has a lot of EVM chains. So, for example, Chronos, Story Protocol, Berachain are all built on Cosmos technology.
Hi, I'm Devin Walsh. I'm the executive director and founder of the Uniswap Foundation. I'm here, I believe, because Uniswap, the ecosystem launched Unichain, a chain for DeFi applications that has been built by the Uniswap Labs team, is supported by the Uniswap Foundation, and launched about 2 weeks ago now. So I think I'll be chatting about that.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jacob Creech. I do developer relations at Solana Foundation. So that can be anything that has anything to do with developers, anything under the sun with devs. And that's me.
Hey guys, GM. My name is Robbie Clagis. I am co-host of the collective learning experience that is the Rollup. We talk about everything that goes on chain and more. Thanks.
Awesome. And then finally, a little bit more about myself. My name's Liam. I got my start in crypto through blockchain at Berkeley many years ago in 2017, 2018. Left that to go work on stablecoins at PayPal before joining the Cosmos ecosystem and working on a project called Evmos, which is building EVM compatibility for the Cosmos ecosystem. And now I'm at Anagram, where we focus on investing, advising, and building, particularly across the Solana and Ethereum ecosystems. And today we're going to be talking about everyone's building new chains, but who the fuck cares? As more and more chains pop up, how do we bring more attention to them, and how do we spread out that mind share across all these projects? And so I guess without further ado, I would love to start the conversation with you, Jacob. We've got representation here from a lot of different teams that are looking at various scaling options, especially as it comes to L2s or app chains. Solana has largely taken the stance of focusing on growing the main L1 rather than looking at alternatives. I'm curious to just get your perspective on what do you think about the L2 landscape and app chain landscape as it continues to grow at a pretty quick rate.
Okay. So I'm very much into the L1 landscape, right, for Solana. I think it can be a place for L2s. It really depends on what is the L2 doing differently that the L1 cannot do. Like, for example, if one day a great example is the network, like the internet, is a bottleneck for Solana because the way that packet sizes or whatever. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's literally a bottleneck for Solana. So there is a room for L2s to make larger changes than Solana can make, because Solana's full focus is increased bandwidth, reduced latency. So I think there is a place for L2s, depending on what their L1 cannot do. And then if there is a place, there is opportunity, and it should definitely be built.
I'm curious then, as L2s are taking over Ethereum, and there's been a lot of criticisms from a variety of folks in the Solana ecosystem about that fragmentation. How are you guys thinking about that fragmentation? And is there anything that you guys are doing proactively where you think you'll be able to solve those problems differently than Unichain or Cosmos ecosystem has?
Yeah, so Solana in general is trying to innovate as much as possible to where it is going to be limited by just the physical limits of reality, like speed of light is too slow. So as long as you get to that, like execution time, it's an execution chain for anything that you want to do that's settlement. Then you get to the point where the opportunity space for L2s on top of Solana are more like if you want a permissioned L2, or you have something that needs to do something that is like for gaming. You obviously can't build games on Solana, so you have people building like ephemeral rollups on Solana. Yeah, totally fine. They do things differently that Solana limits, even if it reaches that high execution state. So that's what we continue to focus on, like make it so that we have the high execution path, so that the opportunity space is not going to fragment, it's actually going to allow new things to be built.
Do you see projects like Unichain and Cosmos kind of competing for you guys for mindshare and TVL, and possibly taking away from the Solana ecosystem?
You can say anything, don't worry.
Not really.
I guess or I can jump
Please,
in.
go for it.
I mean, I think like different kinds of users prefer different kinds of trade-offs. I guess, and that's why I think there's a lot of beef between Solana and Ethereum these days, and like some healthy competition is, I think, good. To be honest, I think it makes both ecosystems stronger. Probably it helps point out the weak points, but generally, I think like any given user, they typically they may just care about one thing, in which case whatever platform or layers of infrastructure are most optimized for that thing matters most. But like a series of inputs, for instance, like what else is within the ecosystem in which they're operating within? Like what are the trust assumptions of this infrastructure? Like those things may play into what apps are built on top of the chain or the L2, and what users may come. So I think it's like we're all working to build a better internet, right? And I think like having different trade-off spaces is healthier, and will make us stronger to ultimately supersede Web2 apps and the internet.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that, because like the competitive space, as long as you have competition, it's good. No one becomes complacent, and you continually to build what's best for the user.
Yeah. I was on a panel earlier at Solana Wrapped with Max Resnick, who has very strong opinions on whether, yes, yeah. I think he posted yesterday that the app chain thesis was wrong. So it's not wrong. It's sort of hard to argue that it's wrong when it's like already in existence. And we have here one of the most successful DeFi protocols ever in existence that made the decision to build their own chain, right? And many others following suit. Ondo just announced their chain. Athena is exploring their chain. And I think it's precisely for this reason of there's this question of sovereignty in crypto, which is the ability to basically fully control the infrastructure and the trust assumptions on which you run, and being able to do things that you would never be able to do on a generalized L1, no matter how amazing it is. And that's not to say that I think there's going to not be really successful major L1s. Like I'm a huge supporter of the Solana ecosystem. Lily, the head of the Solana Foundation, was also on the foundation of Osmosis. There's tremendous ways of collaborating there. But I do believe that there are going to be an increasing class of more performant applications that specialize their hardware and specialize the very rails on which they run. One of the best examples I think recently is Hyperliquid, which is an extremely performance-focused L1 for one specific use case, perpetuals trading. Right? It's built on top of Cosmos technology. And I think they did that because they really wanted to push the limits. And I think it would be very hard for them to do that in a place that's shared and has infrastructural concerns shared with other places.
So Magnus, you talk about a lot of these notable projects that are building their own roll-ups or building their own app chains. And while that's absolutely true, it's not without its challenges. There's been a lot of projects who have really struggled to attract TVL, to attract mindshare, to have integrations and composability with other DeFi. I mean, even when I looked at Unichain earlier today, there's not even $10 million of TVL.
2 weeks in.
I know, it's only a couple weeks in, right? I totally get that. But especially since Uniswap has already had all these deployments and all these other ecosystems, you're now competing for mindshare with your own existing deployments. And so I'm curious, for both of you guys, how what challenges do you see for building an app chain or building an app rollup, and how do you guys plan on overcoming those to be still competitive with the Solanas of the world?
Yeah, I can take a first shot at answering that. So I mean, I think generally for any app chain, any application, any team looking to launch their own L2, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, just from like the design, speccing something out, like figuring out, okay, even if you're using something that's kind of out of the box, like from Arbitrum or from the OP stack, like you have to think through, how is this going to be differentiated? It's launching a product, right? And it's launching it, for many cases, an entire developer ecosystem, which, depending upon what your application is, you may not have experience like launching an ecosystem. It's quite expensive, just having like baseline indexers, like node infrastructure, like just like running the sequencer, all of those things. You get to like the tens of millions of dollars of cost just like baseline pretty quickly, and not a lot of teams can necessarily take that on. Like I think to your point, Liam, there have been OP stack chains which have wound down just because they've been like unprofitable for so long. I think from I guess like Uniswap's perspective, like while I'm incredibly excited about the prospects for Unichain, I think it's like highly differentiated and serves like an incredibly important use case for the future development and just like scaling of Ethereum specifically. I do not foresee a world in which Unichain is the only player in the game. I think that would actually be kind of like the entire kind of like thesis behind Unichain in some ways is to be a settlement layer and like a hub for like to enable more seamless, fast, easy interop across many chains. So I definitely see a world in which there are many chains, in which Solana continues to thrive, in which Cosmos continues to thrive, in which Arbitrum continues to thrive. And I think, I guess like having Uniswap as just like a platform, as a developer platform, like the protocol across other chains, I think there's a really strong, compelling use case for that as well.
Yeah, I can build on that a bit. On the Rollup, we start talking a lot about this mental model of a healthy economy, a healthy on-chain economy, not so much in terms of TVL, but more in terms of monetary velocity. It's not very indicative of a healthy economy to just have $1 billion just sitting there not doing anything. What's really an indication of a healthy economy is buying and selling and trading and money changing hands and goods changing hands and products changing hands. And so the case of Unichain building out its own settlement, I think that is an indication that we don't need a lot of TVL to say that Unichain is working, or any other app chain for that matter. Facilitating monetary flows across all the deployments of Uniswap, and Unichain being a hub or a settlement engine for all of those flows can be just as successful an indication as a massive amount of TVL. And so I think we'll start to kind of evolve the way that we're measuring success for a lot of these chains, not in terms of TVL, but in terms of some of these other metrics like velocity of flows going through that chain.
Sure, and I know like the metrics of like comparing chains is always difficult, but like as Devin mentions, like there's this huge upfront cost of building your own chain and all the infrastructure that comes along with it. Meanwhile, while it can sometimes be hard to find a usable RPC in the Solana ecosystem, like otherwise it's pretty easy to deploy and get started. Same with Ethereum, right? Like why, especially given how much value Ethereum has given to Uniswap, why take that value away and move it somewhere else? Sure.
Do you mind rephrasing the question? I'm not sure
Yeah, sorry, I kind of combined a few points there. So maybe let's just start with the first point there, which is, it's a lot easier to deploy to an existing L1 rather than like spin up your own L2 or own app chain. And like while yes, like the things that you can do with that app chain in L1 are very different, it's still just like hard to get started. And so like who should be building app chains, I guess? Should anybody be building app chains?
Yeah, okay. So the question is, like Uniswap built Unichain. Who else should consider building their own chain? I think it's a good question. I mean, one of the key inputs into the decision, I guess, from Uniswap's perspective is like the vast majority of MEV is tied to like DEX transactions, and specifically on Ethereum, it's Uniswap. And I think from Uniswap's perspective, like it has like pretty considerable market share today, but we're focused on growing the pie and improving execution quality to bring in the next wave of hundreds of thousands of users who will be trading real-world assets and all these different other kinds of assets like FX, et cetera, on Uniswap. And the amount of MEV leakage that is happening today is just unacceptable. And going to an L2 and working with teams like Flashbots to build flash blocks, so which when it launches later this year will enable 250 millisecond flash blocks within kind of like a blocks transaction. That is huge in terms of like mitigating MEV not only for LPs but for users. And so I guess for us, that's just like one input into the equation, but it's like, okay, it is a way in which Uniswap can provide an order of magnitude improved user experience for swappers and LPs. It's kind of like its core user experience. I think like another interesting example from Uniswap's perspective is just like more ownership and control over chain development. So I don't know folks who follow this closely, but Uniswap V4 launched recently, and one of the kind of the big obstacles to Uni V4 launching was the adoption of T-Store, basically like an ERC, or like a, what is it called? Like basically like an upgrade to Ethereum chain to Ethereum that had to be adopted, and I forget the name of the actual like upgrade, but it allowed for like a new form of storage that enabled V4 to actually work. And it's kind of crazy to think about, like the largest like revenue driver for Ethereum, the largest most used application on Ethereum, like could not launch because like the chain just like had its own, and the Alcor devs team had, like other priorities for what to include. So for Ethereum or for Uniswap, it's just like that is another like value prop, right? Like having more control over like what how in this case the superchain evolves as a big player there. So I guess to abstract that away, I think like there have to be really solid reasons why, not just like launching for any arbitrary reason, but order of magnitude improvement to user experience, or like unblocking obstacles that exist by building on an L1. I guess are two examples.
And Jacob, does this go back to your point earlier of just like, the kinds of use cases that you think are good for, L2s or network extensions?
Yes, absolutely, because it's like there's something that was not, like it enabled you to do something better.
Yeah.
And being that you have more control, you can do more things.
Yeah.
And so that's what we also see in like the Solana ecosystem as SVM L2s and rollups are being built out. It's like they have a very specific thing in mind that they want, and they can't wait for the chain to catch up. Or maybe it's a different priority. Like a lot of the ZK stuff has taken like 2 years to come out on Solana, so you see a bunch of ZK stuff being moved out. That's fine. It makes sense because it's like, okay, we're giving you more control as an L2, but the main chain will still be moving on. As long as you settle back, everybody's happy, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Robbie, I'm curious. I know a lot of your guys' content is Ethereum focused, but as Solana, maybe leans more into, the world of L2s, is that interesting to you? Like, do you find that, going to be interesting amongst the rest of your Rollup peers?
We have lots of Solana friends. We have friends all across the ecosystems. We're not maximalists. We try not to be tribal. I'm a technology maximalist. I am a big fan of innovation wherever it happens, and we try to represent that in our podcasts. We've had Mert, the Solana chief of shitposting, on the podcast, and we do see that the product market fit that Solana has with meme coins and eventually like the financial ecosystem is possible on a single state machine to a certain extent, and then there's times to lead into customizations on rollups when the time and place is right for that change. We have this notion of the app chain lifecycle or the application lifecycle, and the idea is that there's an iterative approach. These applications start with a minimal proof of concept, usually looks like some kind of contract, smart contract on the L1. With product market fit, and you see that with Uniswap, you see that with lots of applications, you graduate to an app chain. So it's not something that you should really be building, from day zero pre-seed. It's something that you kind of build your way up to. There's a third stage to that life cycle, which is kind of fun, which is launch a stable coin and try to get some monetary premium along with your project as well. Not many teams have reached that level yet, but you do see some of those. Aave kind of skipped right to the third step, and I think eventually they may have an app chain approach as well. But this is kind of the life cycle that we see. It's an iterative approach that allows your application to evolve its infrastructure as it scales its user base and its products.
I was just going to add one thing, which is I think there are always going to be a set of applications that really make sense on sort of like a large L1. So like in my mind, I've seen so many pump.fun clones on other ecosystems that are like pump.fun app chains, like pump.fun clones like within smaller chains. They're just, they don't work, right? And I think part of that is there are times where having incredible amount of synchronous composability with local liquidity is really important, right? And I think we saw that play out as one of the biggest successes of basically like a large app chain or a large chain thesis. I think a big piece of the conversation that might be missing is multi-chain is very new. And the thing that it really introduced is this concept of interop, right? Like, interop is this idea of going between different chains, right, over some bridge or some message passing protocol. And because multi-chain happened faster than interop was designed, we have all these terrible user experiences. And I think it makes the experience of using a single chain substantially better. There's a lot of thought going into interop, but one of the things, in Cosmos, we have IBC, which is natively built in interop. One of the things I'd really like to see is an expansion of that interop mission and to see what kind of applications we can come up with that employ sort of local zones of liquidity like Solana, like Ethereum, once that interop gets really, really good, like sub-second, if possible.
Final question I have as we wrap up this conversation. We started with Jacob, and so I'll end with you, Jacob, as well. I was talking to Nick White the other day, and he had a potentially, controversial take of, he sees Solana as, as it's the home of Launchpad meme coins right now, as also being the Launchpad for rollups and L2s and app chains. And he sees it as a lot of teams are going to go to Solana and build their initial project, and then they're going to hit scaling limits because there's a really strong community. Then they're going to hit scaling limits and move on to their own app chain or rollup, similar to how kind of Jupiter is kind of currently going through the process. I'm curious, one, are you supportive of that vision? And two, do you have any worries about kind of the value extraction that happens, by projects just like coming in temporarily, taking a lot of that value, and then potentially leaving with it to, build their own roll-up or app chain on Cosmos?
So the core engineers that both on Onza, FireDancer, et cetera, will say if there's ever a L2 that's building to be faster than Solana, they will outcompete them, and to where they will basically beat them at their own game. I don't think JupeNet is not actually being built because it hit any scaling limits. It was being built because it's waiting on cryptography schemes to be built on Solana, which I'm thinking are probably a year out. So anything that's like execution based, the core devs have made clear we will outcompete any L2 that's going based off of scaling limits that are, in the long term, not going to be real on Solana.
So Magnus, do you think you can beat Solana's scaling limits with your app chains?
I don't think any app chain will ever beat Solana's scaling limits.
Okay.
But I do believe that sometimes scale is not the decision that people choose when they build their own app chain.
Yep.
Great points.
Before we wrap up, I just want to mention that I think the chain-centric view is a bit outdated. I tend to think that we have this multi-chain approach, and I think everyone sort of sees this multi-chain approach continuing to proliferate. Eventually, every rollup will be a ZK rollup, and we'll just continue to expand outwards. And in that world, I tend to think that these L1s, L2s, they don't really, there's not really a hierarchical mental model anymore. We kind of just have these amorphous blobs of state that just exist in the void, and we're going to connect them with some kind of interop, probably ZK interop. Once every chain can generate its ZK proof and verify ZK proof, everything will just be a ZK application, and we'll just connect them all via ZK proofs.
Interesting. I look forward to seeing how the future plays out. Thank you all for the time today. I know we're over time.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening.